Tom Campbell here. I and MBT Events hope you like this video. It was made possible by donations from our supporters. If you're one of them, thank you so very, very much. If you're new to MBT and find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. It would be very much appreciated. The links are in the description below. Thank you.
I'm curious to know more about the interior of your personal experience in terms of your relationship with your intellect, your thoughts, emotions, and your intuition. What is it like, and how do you think it's different or similar to that of the average person? For example, when you are on your own, sitting in your car or standing in line somewhere, or maybe just going for a walk, what is the interior of your experience like? The average person would just have their relatively pointless monkey mind chatter going on. What's it like for you? Is your mind just completely thoughtless, and are you completely present in the moment in PMR for long stretches of time? Or are you taking the opportunity to completely detach from PMR and do something more useful in some other reality frame? Or are you processing something intellectually? Or is it something else altogether? Do you still occasionally get caught by a relatively pointless thought stream? Do you still have moments where you just let your intellect loose to randomly process things and do its random monkey mind chatter?
That was a whole bunch of questions.
Yes.
That was not one question. That was a whole lot of questions. So I'll just kind of go through it and answer them
Yes.
as they go. You know, if I'm just relaxed standing in line or hanging out someplace with nothing to do, what's going on in my mind? Generally, no chatter. I generally don't have chatter in my mind. That's a pretty rare event. I'm almost always more in the bigger picture rather than in the little picture. It's typically big picture thoughts or no thoughts. So I could just be standing there with no thoughts. But often I have to force myself to remain aware of the little picture. So if I'm out in the little picture space, having to do little picture things, you know, like stand in line to get something or do something or purchase something or whatever, I can very easily forget that that's what I'm doing. And I have to kind of force myself to pay attention to what I'm doing because my mind, it doesn't drift away, but it just moves to bigger picture things. It's not that I wander off into la la land or something. I'm just observing. I observe other people and how they are, the state of their mind, the state of their feelings, just in general to kind of keep up with what's the average person out there in the world, you know, how they're thinking and what are they doing. So I just kind of tune in on the environment, on what's happening, and have a big picture awareness and enough little picture awareness just to get done what it is I'm standing in line for. Now, if I get to be the next person in line, that'll shift. If I'm the next one up, then I'll only be 10% focused in the little picture and 90% focused on what happens when that person in front of me leaves. I have to step up. I have to, you know, put my deposit up on the counter at the bank. You know, I have to do something and I have to ask them for certain sorts of things. So I I go in and out. So I typically, if I don't have to be dealing in the little picture, I'm not dealing in the little picture. If I have to, then I put my attention there and I do that. So that's typically the way I am. Is your mind just completely thoughtless? And I just wrote little answers to these, so I kind of read them and I'll read the answers. Is your mind completely thoughtless? Off and on as required. So oftentimes it will be thoughtless for periods of time, and then I'll become interested in something, usually some big picture thing, and or something happening, or I might be thinking about how I could express something better, difficulties and that I'm having getting into the mainstream, and what would be a good strategy for doing that. It might be some of that kind of thing going on. Are you completely present in the moment in PMR for long stretches of time? Well, mostly, I guess, for fairly long stretches of time. It depends. If I'm doing something that requires attention, then yes. Some things that you do in the little picture require your attention. You can't, you end up doing them wrong or wasting your time or not doing them satisfactorily and have to do them over or waste other people's time. So those things that require my attention, then I stay plugged in at least enough to know what I have to do next. And then when it's my turn or I have to actually take some action that's important, then I'll focus on just what I'm doing. So if I were, polishing to get a scratch out of my car, I saw a little scratch in the paint and I got some rubbing compound and I'm rubbing it. Well, when I'm doing that, I'm very, very focused on that scratch. I'm not focused on the rest of the world. I don't really pay attention to anything else, comings and goings of anybody. I'm focusing on that scratch and making sure that I put the right pressure in the right spot. Don't rub too hard on the wrong spots. See if there's any progress going on because when you do rubbing compound on a car, you can overdo it. You can damage the car's finish if you push too hard or too long. So it's something where you have to pay attention. So when I do that, then I'm in the moment with that task completely. And you could walk by and maybe even say something to me, and I might not even notice because I was just so focused doing that particular thing, I wasn't paying attention. On the other hand, if I were just, let's say I'm washing my car and I just in the process of drying it off, well, that doesn't require any particular focus. You're just rubbing a rag over it, and you need a little bit of attention so you don't skip spots, but mostly it's not. And then if you walk by, it'd be no trouble doing that, having a conversation, or doing something else inside my mind while I was doing that. So sometimes I parallel process, sometimes not. Just depends. But almost never have monkey mind anymore, where it just goes on and jabber. Matter of fact, the only time that I catch myself with the thoughts just monkey mind jabbering, it's usually just for a few seconds, and it almost always happens when I'm in a shower in the morning, taking a shower, because at that time I'm half asleep anyway, but I'm waking up and the warm water is just nice and relaxing. And you just kind of sit there and you feel the water, and then your mind kind of goes loose. And it might jump into some kind of chatter, monkey mind at that point, but it usually doesn't last for a few seconds because as soon as I recognize it as monkey mind, I stop it. Yeah, I do something more interesting and more productive. But it does sometimes jump in at that time, but I can't think of any other time that it typically does. Usually my mind is either focused on what I'm doing or elsewhere, focused not, on things that are non-physical or on big picture things. So it's usually busy, but sometimes not. If I really don't have anything to think about, I can just stand there being aware of things and not think anything. Just basically have no thoughts at all while I'm waiting, say, for someone. If I have to go pick somebody up at the airport and I have to wait for 15 minutes, I can just sit down and have no thoughts. And every once in a while, I'll glance at the clock to see how long I have left to go. So I can start paying attention when the person is expected to come in or when the plane, gets to the dock or something, then I need to start to focus. But until that, if I've got a long wait, sometimes, like when I take Pamela, sometimes she'll have to go to a doctor's appointment where they're going to put her under anesthesia because they're going to do something to her eyes, which are real sensitive, and they need to knock her out so she doesn't blink or do anything. So I'll have to wait for her sometimes for 2, 3 hours, and they don't want you to leave because they don't know exactly when they're going to be done, and they don't want the place stacking up with people waiting to go home. They want them to go out the door when they're done with them. So they ask the driver to stay in the area, to stay in the parking lot. Just go sit in your car. So I'll often sit in the car for 2 or 3 hours, and the time passes usually pretty quickly. But monkey mind is not a part of it. I might do some meditation. I might work on problems. I might think about other things, but usually it's all structured and thinking about them because I want to. It's not just the free reign of the mind to just jabber on about whatever it wants to. Evidently, it just doesn't want to jabber about things anymore. It, I don't know whether it's given up out of frustration or what, but it doesn't seem to have a lot to jabber about except some probably one in 10 showers. I get a little bit of that, and I'll catch myself and I go, "What was all of that? That's a bunch of garbage. Where did that come from?" So that just happens occasionally. Probably no more than, I don't know, 5, 10 seconds, and then it's gone. And that happens no more than, maybe once a month or something. So you can add that 10 seconds, for 12 months. So it's 120 seconds a year spent on monkey mind, something like that.
Don't you find that there's some value in just letting your mind loose and sort of in an idle state in order for maybe interesting things to come up that aren't necessarily directed by you? Or I guess maybe that's more of an intuitive state. It's not so much the monkey mind
Yeah,
chatter.
and I say yes, you do that, but I do that on purpose. It's not something that just happens. It's something I want to do. There's some information I'm interested in, and then I will do that. I'll just kind of let it be blank, be open, make my query and get the information. Or
Yes.
sometimes, like you say, I can just open up, see what comes. In the sense that is there anything that's particularly important for me to know right now, sort of thing. So I do all of that, but I do it intentionally. It doesn't just happen because I'm not paying attention.
Right. And another question, do you see value in just being completely present in PMR when you're not necessarily doing something that requires your focus? So for example, when you're sitting there in the hospital waiting for Pamela, just sitting there and just listening to the sounds, watching the people walk by, looking at whatever, the wall, the paintings, but just being completely PMR focused, but not in your intellect. Is that do you find that a valuable way to spend your time? Because that is what is often recommended by mindfulness teachings and teachers, to just be completely in the moment and don't think about anything, don't do anything else. What's your view on that?
Well, I can do that for fairly long periods of time if I need to. And sometimes if I'm sitting in my car or at the hospital, I will just do that, just kind of watch people walk by, look at the building, not really paying a whole lot of attention to any of it, but paying attention to everything that moves and changes, you kind of notice. So I may do that, but this idea of being in the moment, I think is misunderstood a lot. We talk about just being in the moment, be focused on what you're doing. And that has its place and its time, but I disagree that that's the thing to do always. I don't think that's necessary. There are times when you're not like sitting in a waiting room. There are times when it's perfectly good not to be present, not to be there, but to be doing something else more constructive and more valuable with your mind. So it's not something you should strive to do. And people misunderstand the be here now thing. They think that it has to do with just being aware of what you're doing. It's not just about awareness of what you're doing, it's being aware of why you're doing it is even a more important part. Why are you doing this? What's the significance of it? what is the contribution of it? Why are you doing it? And how do you feel about that? Why you're doing it? That's important. No matter what you're doing, if you're sitting in a hospital waiting, why are you there? Well, I'm there because my wife needs me to be there, because it's convenient for the hospital staff to be able to push her out the door when she's done than to have her store her someplace. So that's why I'm there, at their convenience and at the convenience of my wife, because she'd like to get out of that place just as soon as she can. She doesn't want to sit around and have to wait either. So I'm there because that's where I want to be, because that's the need now for my attention, and I'm happy to be there. So it's the feeling. Why am I here and how do I feel about it? That's important. And that's important to be aware of that all the time. And I think that's what people must mean when they actually say, be here now. It's not just, okay, I'm sitting here, there goes somebody, that girl keeps walking back and forth from that office to that office, and, just kind of being aware. That's not really valuable. I don't find that particularly valuable. You're not really focused tightly on anything. You're just being aware of what you're doing. Let's say you're washing dishes. Okay, now why are you washing dishes? Well, you're washing dishes because a lot of people were there. You had company, there's a bunch of dishes piled up. All right, then how do you feel about that? You might say, well, I don't feel good about it. I don't think I should be washing these dishes. Somebody else ought to be. I have to wash the dishes all the time. How come I always get stuck with the dishes? Okay, now, so if you're feeling sorry for yourself and life isn't the way you want it, well, that's a problem. You have to come and say, well, that's not a good thought. You know, if you're washing dishes, it should be because, why am I washing dishes? Because the dishes need to be washed. And that's why I'm washing them. They are there, they're dirty, other people are doing other things, and I'm available, so I'm washing them just because they need to. And I'm glad to wash them because it's nice to have clean dishes and not have a house full of dirty dishes sitting around. It's more aesthetic, it's just more pleasant, smells better, looks better. It'll make the whole house, it'll prove things if the kitchen is tidy and clean. So I want it to be that way. That's why I'm doing the dishes. you know so it makes a difference. So if you know why you're there and how you feel about it, you should be aware of those things all the time. At least check in on them and see if they change. But just being aware of where you are and what you're doing, to me, has almost no value at all. I think that whole thing is misunderstood. And somebody, yes, said, what was the name of a book even? Be here now. Ram Dass, I believe, wrote that. Be here now. Well, yes, that's part of it, but he didn't just mean be here. I think what he meant is be aware of not only what you're doing, but why you're doing it and how you're doing it and your attitude toward doing it and how you feel about doing it. Be aware of all of that as you're doing it. That's what I get out of be aware, not just, all right, I'm in a room, there's a couch, there's a chair, people walk back and forth. Okay, still there, same couch, yeah, different people, same couch, still there. I'm aware of everything. That's silly. Who cares about the environment that much? I mean, it's just not that important, right? So I think that's just wrong. Doing that, you might as well shut your eyes and meditate. Get rid of it altogether, not be aware of it. That would make being here now kind of the antithesis of of meditation. It's like the anti-meditation. Well, that wouldn't be a good thing. Anti-meditation doesn't sound too good, but you know, be connected to your physical reality and all of its little details all the time. I don't think that's what is meant by be here now. I think it's just, if that is what's meant, then, I'd have to say it doesn't sound like they really know what they're talking about, but I don't believe that's true. I think the people who say those things really do know what it is they're talking about. They're just not saying it very clearly, what they're talking about. So, yes, be engaged in what you're doing fully is what they actually mean. And be engaged in what you're doing fully doesn't mean just watch the stuff. It means be fully engaged. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? How do I feel about it? That's being engaged with it fully. And I think that's what they mean by it. But so many people interpret it as just, all right, I'm washing the dishes. I need to be aware of each dish and all the little particles on each dish and make sure it each gets scrubbed and I do a really thorough and good job. That's what it means. I don't think so. All right, you should always do a good job. That's part of it. But you're not going to gain any great spiritual benefits by making sure your plates are squeaky clean. That's not, the point. The point is you're providing services to other people. And how do you feel about those services? And are the services necessary? Are they meaningful and are they significant? And why is that? What do they derive their significance from? And how should you feel that you have the task to do this? Is that good? Is that okay with you? Are you annoyed by it? Does it upset you? You know, so are you happy to serve in that capacity, or does it rankle you that you have to serve in that capacity? So those are the things that are important, not just sitting and observing your surroundings, because you're washing dishes and so you inspect each dish with love. That's just nonsense. You don't do that.
And the reason that connecting with why you're doing what you're doing is important is because that's working with that being level intent and refining it and making it of higher quality.
Exactly. That's right. So, you should end up washing those dishes because it's a good thing to do. And you feel glad that you have an opportunity to be of service and that the other people there are able to go interact and hang out with each other because they need that time. That's very valuable for them and they will learn and it'll be good experience for them. And you don't need it as much as they do. You don't have to have your ego, brushed and polished and that kind of stuff like happens in those conversations. So you feel good about what you're doing. It's a needed service and you enjoy it for that reason. It's not so much, oh, I love every little dish and every little spoon. I love this spoon and I'm going to wash it to perfection. You know, that's kind of much. Yeah, it's not that. It's just that, okay, I get the job of washing the dishes. That's good. I just as soon do it and let other people interact because I don't really need the interaction that much. Other people get a lot out of that interaction. I mainly just quiet and listen. I don't I don't talk a lot in social settings. I mostly just listen. So I'm the perfect person to do the dishes. You see, so I see it that way. So I do them and I do them well because my parents, particularly my father, told me at least 1,000 times, anything worth doing is worth doing well. Anything worth doing is worth doing right. So if it's worth doing, then do it well and do it right. So I do that. I'm careful at what I do, but that's not the point. The point isn't to make sure you get the dishes sparkly clean or to give your love and thanks to every knife and fork. That's kind of superfluous. If you get into that sort of thing, I think you're kind of missing the point of what it's all about. You can thank all your knives, forks, and spoons, but that's not going to help you grow up any. It's kind of a waste of your time. You'd be better off just doing the things you have to do with a good attitude. And if you think, you're being abused, oh, I always have to do the dishes, then you should think about that. Is that true? Are you just whining? Are you self-centered that you don't want other people to have fun if you don't get to have fun too? I mean, what's going on there? Why do you feel that way? And you probably come to the conclusion that it's just your ego complaining about not getting what it wants. Then it's a matter of saying, ego, that's pretty small-minded of you. Sit down and be quiet. I'm going to do these dishes because I want to. So butt out, and then that helps you get rid of that fear. You see, so yeah, that's a very misunderstood idea. Be here now. It's not the stuff you have to be with. Being with stuff is probably the least important thing you can do, but It's why are you doing it? It's some of how you're doing it, why you're doing it, what the point is, the value of it, the significance of it. So I'm sitting at the hospital waiting for my wife, but I love my wife. I want to support her. I need to be there when she's ready so I can be there to help her walk back out to the car or whatever. And I need to be aware so that I have to pay attention to that little speaker system in there in case my name is the one that gets called. So I listen to it fairly intently while I'm doing nothing else. Even if I'm thinking about something else, I'll have a part of my mind focused on that little speaker every time it goes off to see if my name's in it. Anyway, so that's my take on that. Yeah, the be here now is kind of drifted into the ridiculous in many ways for many people. It's not that, but it's not just that being with whatever you're doing. It's being with whatever you're doing consciously. Be aware of what you're doing, which means why and how and what and all the things that go with it. Be totally aware of it. Not make sure you follow all the little pieces as they move around on a board. That isn't important.
I'm really happy you clarified this because it's something that I always had a bit of an issue with. I do maybe something that some value that it has is that a lot of people are stuck in fearful thinking patterns a lot of the times. Like a lot of like when they're in their mind, they're thinking fearful thoughts, negative thoughts, and from that perspective, pushing yourself into the moment, even if it's something insignificant, like, I don't know, watching people, as long as you're not engaged with those dysfunctional thoughts, at least that's a step up compared to just being lost in those dysfunctional thought streams. So maybe it's also like an sort of an in-between kind of step towards something more functional.
Sounds to me like it's another kind of rug that you get to stuff things under so that you don't notice them.
Oh, that's also a good point. Yes.
Oh,
That's
well,
that's a
I've
good
got this
point.
fear, so instead of dwelling on my fear, I'll watch people or I'll watch TV, or something else. Put my earphones on and listen to music. I'll somehow distract myself so I don't have to really deal with things like I'm annoyed that I have to wash the dishes or that I have to wait in my car for 3 hours, because I'm self-centered and that stuff annoys me because it's not what I want to do with my life. And everybody else in the world should modify themselves to, so that my life is the way, that I want it to be. And if those are kind of issues and the fears you're having, and you're just being self-centered, then covering it over with something is just another way of stuffing it under a rug. It's just a different kind of rug. People do that all the time with sound. You'll go into somebody's house and they'll have the TV running, nobody's watching it, or radio's on and nobody's listening to it. It's just there to create noise so that the people there don't have to think about anything important. They can just let their mind be with the fuzz and the buzz on what's going on without ever thinking about themselves, without ever being present, but not present to watch the room, present to witness who am I? What am I doing here? What's this all about? How do I feel about it? And is that good or is it bad? Is it something I need to change in myself or is it something that I'm okay with? And that's the be here now. Be present, not watch the vase on the table because your job is to wait. It's why are you waiting? How do you feel about waiting? And most people will probably say they don't like it. It's inconvenient. They'd rather be doing something else, something more productive. They're behind at work. They have email to catch up on. And they can't do that here because there's no internet connection or whatever. And they're annoyed with the fact that they have to sit and wait, or that they have to do the dishes, or that, whatever it is, they have to stand in line in order to get to the teller at the bank because that's not the way they'd like reality to be. So they go into the bank and they get in a line, and there's a little old lady up at the top. It takes 5 minutes just to get her purse open, to find a document because she's old and she can't find it. And they're sitting back there steaming about, they're having to wait because this old lady is taking so long, and you have to, that's not being present because you're really focused on the little old lady. That's just not being aware of how you're acting, of how you're presenting, not being aware of who you are and why you're that way. So that's the awareness that you need, not the awareness of the establishment or the little old lady or the line, but it's awareness of how do you fit into all of that? What's your connection to that? And how should you connect with it? And how do you connect with it? And is there a difference between those two? See, that way you're learning all the time. Everything you do is a lesson. Everything you do is a check to see whether or not you're doing it well or not, rather than just going through life with the TV blaring so you don't have to think about anything. You think about everything. So you have to get in the bank line and you wait patiently. And if that little old lady takes, 5 minutes finding her checkbook, well, that's okay. She's old. She's doing the best she can. You can't, holler at her, tell her to hurry up. That would just terrify her. She'd probably start crying, and it would take another 5 minutes, to get her calmed down before the line would move. You need to be nice, and maybe you're 5 people back, so you can't really, you can't help her. Here, let me get in your purse and, help you find it. That would be inappropriate. You don't go through other people's private belongings. So you just wait and you have empathy for her. Poor lady, she's in a line, she's old, she knows she's holding up people and taking a long time. She's a little flustered by that, and she's starting to get a little upset with herself. So instead, you give her some calming energy. You just understand, you're fine, you're all right, these people can wait, don't worry about it. Your checkbook, it's right in there. Just put your hand where it's supposed to be and it'll be there. You calm her. That's what you do. Now that's better than just standing in line steaming at some old ladies, taking up your valuable time. So that's the kind of awareness that we're talking about as far as the be there now. It's be aware of you and your event and how you are, not stare at your surroundings carefully. It's kind of turned into that for a lot of people, but that's a waste of time staring at your surroundings carefully, unless you're the new interior decorator. Then staring at your surroundings carefully would be part of your job. But that's yeah, I hear that a lot too, and I hear people misusing it. And I usually just keep my mouth shut, but you've given me a chance to to voice. Yeah, I'm also a little aware of how that's misinterpreted. The be here now is not just be present in what you're doing, but it's be present about who you are and what you are and why you are, and how what you're doing relates to the rest of reality. Why is it significant? That's what they mean. It's not that those folks who wrote that didn't really understand what they were saying. They knew exactly what they were saying. They just did not understand that other people could possibly misunderstand that.
Thank you, Tom. That was I'm really happy you made that point. It's a really, really important point in my view.
I and MBT Events hope you liked this video. We now have well over 1,000 hours of free video on this YouTube channel. Though these videos are free to our viewers, they represent many thousands of hours in production and editing, and many thousands of dollars invested in video and audio equipment, along with the required computers and software to store and process the raw video into finished products. So far, all of this content has been funded directly out of our own pockets. Be assured, we will always continue to produce free content. It is our life, our purpose, a labor of love that we will continue to pursue as best we can. However, those pockets are not as deep as they used to be. Thus, we are now seeking to augment our resources with support from our viewers. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. It would be very much appreciated. The links are in the description below. Thank you.